The ROG Xbox Ally X is the hottest handheld right now, but is the Windows operating system it ships with killing your performance? To answer that question, I went to the great length of installing SteamOS on this thing and running hours of benchmarks, so let's jump into it. If you're new here, hey, I'm Coulter, and on this channel we cover everything from retro tech to console mods to generally doing things with tech that they aren't supposed to do out of the box. So if that sounds like you, be sure to hit subscribe below so you don't miss the upcoming videos. So since that fantastic Dave 2D video where he uncovered that a number of Windows-only titles were actually running better on SteamOS, on particularly the Legion Go S, but similar handhelds as well. And since then there's definitely been an even more vocal than usual group saying, why the heck are we even using Windows if the reason we're keeping it around is mostly just because it has a hold on our games library, but now Linux can do that too, so why the heck are we still using Windows? Which is honestly a very good question and valid enough for the Windows team to now add the full screen experience mode to Windows Core, which is basically their baby steps in trying to give you a SteamOS style handheld friendly experience on Windows, pretty much so that we don't hate using Windows as much, especially on these cool and expensive devices. And now that I finally have my ROG Xbox Ally X in hand, it's time to see if this fancier chip and the Xbox full screen experience can close the gap with SteamOS, or if SteamOS is still the winner. First, let me show you exactly what I threw at this thing. We installed Red Dead Redemption 2, Cyberpunk 2077, Arkham Knight, Hogwarts Legacy, The Witcher 3, and Marvel's Spider-Man. I'm trying to throw a pretty wide gamut of games at this thing because, as you'll see, some games perform a little differently than you'd expect than others on SteamOS versus Windows. All of those titles I ran at both 17 watt mode and 35 watt mode in both SteamOS and Windows. Why 17 watt mode, you ask, instead of 15 watt mode? Well, apparently, now that the Z2 Extreme has more power efficiency, ASUS decided that the new performance mode is 17 watt instead of 15 watt because you probably won't notice the difference power drain wise because ASUS knows that those extra 2 watts will be a definite noticeable improvement in games. And conveniently enough, Bazzite also raised their performance mode to 17 watt for this device accordingly, so I just chose performance mode 17 watt and turbo mode 35 watt, the new standards apparently, at least for this chip and device. Now, to get as raw of a SteamOS experience as possible, I wanted to at least try to install real SteamOS in this guy since it does support the original ROG Ally and ROG Ally X. But to try that, I knew that I had to have a bare SSD in here that I was okay completely wiping because you cannot currently easily dual boot the raw SteamOS image on a third-party device. The trick was that my spare SSD was an M.2 2230 and these guys take a full-size 2280 now. Thank you ASUS for that, by the way. That's much cheaper for much larger terabytes that we can buy for these things. So yeah, I literally 3D printed a little adapter on the spot. Took about 15 minutes in my Bamboo and we're back in business. So thank you 3D printing, and especially the guy who made that model. Shout out to you, guy. So I downloaded the SteamOS image, flashed it to a USB, finally got it to show up in the BIOS of this guy, but only ever got a black screen when I tried to launch it. So wah, wah. No pure SteamOS on this guy yet, but I'm sure it's coming because you better believe this thing is on Valve's radar. So like everyone else right now, I resorted to Bazzite on this guy. Thankfully, by the time I went to download Bazzite, they'd already tweaked an image for particularly the Ally X, so I didn't have any issues that others had with the buttons mapping to the correct things or touchscreen responsiveness or anything like that. It was honestly a really easy installation process. I still connected up a keyboard and mouse just to make sure that I could navigate the installation process cleanly, but really in about 10-15 minutes maybe, I was up and going with, as you can see, a very pretty looking SteamOS experience in this guy. And the beauty of using Bazzite is now with my Xbox button, I can easily launch the little Bazzite menu and have easy access to the TDP control, the RGB, custom fan curves, mapping the paddles, and all those handy little extras that Bazzite rolls into it. Whereas with raw SteamOS, I would have had to install a bunch of Decky plugins to achieve that, like I did in my previous video where I installed raw SteamOS on the original Ally. Check out that video if you missed it. And because I'm now running SteamOS in this thing, I nerded out pretty hard, and this is the intro animation on my ROG Ally now. Pretty fitting for an Xbox Ally, if you ask me. If you want a detailed tutorial video on step-by-step instructions to install Bazzite on the Xbox Ally or Xbox Ally X, definitely let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to make that video. As far as installing our test suite of games on SteamOS, most of them installed and ran just fine, with the exception of Red Dead Redemption 2. For some reason, I had to boot into desktop mode and then manually install a version of Proton called GE Proton 10.17, according to good old Proton TV. And then I also had to do the initial run of the game in desktop mode to set the display settings, and then I was able to boot it up just fine in game mode. So just a little example of some of the issues you may have to troubleshoot when you're running Windows games on SteamOS or Linux with Proton and Wine in general. But on the plus side, you don't have to use Windows, so which do you value more? And it turns out getting RDR2 running on SteamOS was very worth it because the benchmark results were quite surprising. We'll get to those in a second. But first I was really curious, now that SteamOS is running on this thing, how it would just look and feel when I just plug this thing in to an external USB-C monitor and just test out the docked console feel, because when you tell me this thing is an Xbox, I would picture I pick it up, I play a game, I put it to sleep, I put it down, I take it home, I dock it like a Nintendo Switch, it shows up on the TV magically like a Nintendo Switch, I grab a controller and I keep playing, minimal configuration, maximum happiness. And surprisingly, I got pretty close to that actually when I plugged it into my UPerfect 16-inch 144Hz monitor. Surprisingly, this mobile chip was able to do like 30 FPS or so at medium settings in Cyberpunk running 1440p. Granted, I ran them in turbo mode, but like 30 FPS in Cyberpunk is nothing to sneeze at, especially from a device this compact. So I was quite pleased, and I just plugged in an Xbox controller and had a pretty surprisingly Xbox feeling experience. So good job, Microsoft, even though I had to install a different operating system on this thing to get that vibe of achieve that properly console experience. Also, big shout out to UPerfect for sending over this external monitor. It's super slim, super light, and super cool. It's got multiple inputs, accepts mini HDMI and USB-C, and it can be powered off of your USB-C device like I did with the Allies. So definitely check out the link in the description to see more about that monitor, and thanks again UPerfect for sending this over. All right, here's what we came for, the raw numbers. These are no FSR, no upscaling, no ray tracing, just pure unadulterated frames. And we ran all these at 1080p on either medium or high settings, and we'll note which one's which. And we did our best to do a proper apples to apples comparison, Xbox full screen experience, Windows 11 versus Bazzite on the Xbox ROG Ally X. So here's what we got. So diving right into Cyberpunk, Bazzite wins, but only by 2 or 3 frames. Performance mode minimums were especially close, but Bazzite did pull ahead by 5 FPS on the lows at 35 watt turbo. So win for Bazzite, but only by a little, and when it comes to practical gameplay, I think 5 FPS is just a decent margin for error, so wouldn't be enough to sway me either way yet. Next up, Red Dead Redemption 2, and as mentioned before, this is where things got pretty spicy. Bazzite actually crushed Windows in this one, getting 10 to 13 FPS better across the board. Over in Spider-Man, Bazzite won at 17 watt performance mode, but Windows took the crown at 35 watt turbo. In Hogwarts Legacy, it was a super close race. Bazzite only beat Windows by 1 to 2 FPS, but in this case, there's actually no built-in benchmark tool, so the margin of error is a little bigger. And so I'm gonna call this one basically a tie. Over in The Witcher 3, this is where things went completely sideways. On Windows, we got 50 to 57 FPS across both power modes, but in Bazzite, I got 22 to 23 or 4 FPS. What? Either something completely broken my test, or none of the Proton modes I fiddled with this game were working, but I've seen other people get better Witcher 3 performance on SteamOS, so I'm gonna chalk it up to I got a bad combination of Proton and Witcher updates or something. So let me know in the comments if maybe you found a fix for this. But yeah, The Witcher 3 ended up being a bad example for performance benchmarks, but a good example for sometimes when you run Windows games on Linux, you just get weird wonky stuff that is really hard to work around, if at all. And lastly, in Arkham Knight, Windows was the clear winner here using the built-in benchmark test of the game. No contest.
No contest.
Now, performance benchmarks are not everything when comparing the Windows experience to the SteamOS experience, especially when this is supposed to be an Xbox console. And one of those big ingredients is sleep and quick resume. Now, Windows sleep has always been a crapshoot, and thankfully it seems to have maybe gotten a little bit better since Alex from LTT made that deep dive video, and then a Windows engineer saw it, and then slowly in the months after that, we kind of saw Windows sleep get better. And maybe that trickled over to this handheld, because in Windows 11, Xbox full screen experience, when I tap power, you know, it might kind of re-wake up for a second and go back down, but it does decently fall asleep and or hibernate. And then later when I want to come back to a game, the game does come back, you know, most of the time at least. Sometimes it needs to just fully restart itself because Windows be Windows right now. And so yes, we have a version of quick resume, but also there are definitely times when yes, I can resume back into a game, but it's like a few FPS slower than it should be, and you can kind of feel Windows waking up in the background even though your game is in front of you. And I tend to just not trust sleep and just close the game completely. I might sleep the main interface, but I don't really sleep on games when I'm in Windows. But SteamOS is a different story. When I'm in a game in SteamOS, I feel very free to just tap that power button, let it go to sleep. I see the little breathing light immediately, and then ba-bam, she's back. It's like a German train in the 90s. It's just reliable. I actually have no idea if German trains were reliable in the 90s. Comment if you know. But yeah, it's that reliable, I know it's going to do this thing because it's supposed to do that thing factor that makes SteamOS much better suited for that console-like experience. Windows has always been it should do this thing, but it might do this thing, so if it does that thing, then restart it and do this thing. Like, Windows is like a recipe book written by a madman. SteamOS, on the other hand, makes the ROG Xbox Ally feel like I'm just using a Switch 2 or something, where I lock it, it goes to sleep. I wake it up, here it is. I play a game, here you go. You plug it in with USB-C, cool, there it is on the screen. Yes, you may have to configure your Proton settings a little bit more, but once that's done, games are installed, they update automatically in the background. I don't have to think about drivers or 4 levels of updates. Like, don't get me started on the Windows 11 setup process where you boot it up and then you have to run Windows updates and Armory Crate updates and Windows Store updates and then game updates. Like, wow, Windows has a lot of work to do to make the Windows Xbox experience feel like an Xbox, you know? However, I do want to give credit where credit is due. Like I said, Windows has always been a crapshoot of confusion and compatibility and backwards compatibility and legacy code and new code and layers and layers and layers, because that's just kind of the Windows story. They never really take a firm stand on, this is what we're doing, get on board or get off it, like Apple did with the macOS Silicon jump. And for as much flack as they get about their big brotherness of their app stores, they do keep their app developers in line to make not crap software appear on their platform. Whereas Windows, on the other hand, has, what, 30 years of baggage that they're trying to both accommodate while somehow shelving aside so that we can focus on playing games on these things. And so I personally think that the Windows full screen experience is a very good step in the right direction. It's not a complete experience. Like I said, setting this device up for the first time definitely required the usual hour of update cycles and reboots and all that stuff. But once it was set up and I booted right into the Xbox full screen experience, it did feel much more SteamOS-like, console-like than any of my Ally devices ever have, which is pretty huge. Like, the fact that when I swipe up, I can just choose what app I want to jump into, and I'm not seeing the Windows Start button and some random toolbar icon popping up and some notice over here. Like, the fact that they were able to shove all that away and save me a couple gigs of RAM, that's a pretty massive starting point, but they definitely need to keep the momentum rolling and finish the job, otherwise it will be a half-baked thing. On top of that, I'm gonna say it, this is the first time I haven't hated the fact that the Windows game bar exists. Having that open with the Xbox button and letting me slide over to like a volume sliders area and quick access to my most cared about settings, and then also rolling the Armory Crate stuff into there, like, that's a pretty clean feeling experience, that game bar thing now. It took Windows about 10 years to make me like the game bar, but they actually finally did it, so good job. So at the end of the day, it of course comes down to your preference. Do you want maximum FPS? In some cases, less driver updates and that true quick resume console experience, even if it means occasionally tweaking Proton settings? Or are you already a Windows gamer at heart who's, like me, happy to see the Xbox full screen experience taking this in a better direction, and you're just gonna root for it to get better as we go? As for me, especially because I have Bazzite sitting on a dedicated SSD, I'm definitely gonna keep this around to swap in, because the performance gains and the forget about it console experience are really hard to argue with. But I'll also be using my Windows SSD a lot too, because at the end of the day, all of my games will definitely work on it, especially the ones that are locked in my Windows store. Definitely got suckered into a couple of Play Anywhere experiences, but SteamOS is not anywhere, Microsoft. And hey, if you're rocking an original ROG Ally, check out my videos where I install both the Xbox full screen experience on the Ally, as well as full-on Bazzite and raw SteamOS. We definitely like playing with allies around here. And if you watched all this way in the video, drop a Santa emoji in the comments so I know that you actually like what I'm putting out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.